Welcome to the Enchanting Lawyer Podcast. This is Jacob Sapochnik. I'm very happy and excited to have you on the show. And today I have a exciting and very special guest, Damon D'Amore. Damon is the CEO and founder of Wayfounder. Wayfounder provides platform and resources for ideas, bringing ideas into execution. And Damon is an accomplished entrepreneur himself. He's been involved in several startups before starting Wayfounder, which was actually the inspiration for Wayfounder. Damon spent several years on Wall Street. He has a lot of experience from that industry. And after that, he was a producer for The Apprentice and The Undercover Boss, specifically focusing on marketing and brand integration. And Damon, I'm very honored to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's great.
Definitely. And Damon, I wanted to, why don't you tell us briefly about yourself? I mean, I know I gave a little intro there, but I think it would be very important for you to kind of tell us a bit where you're coming from and what brought you to where you are today.
Sure. So I grew up in New Jersey, in the 70s and 80s. I've always been more of a hands-on action do person than an academic theoretical person. So I went to community college for a while, always interested in business, read the Wall Street Journal from the time I was 13 every day, wanted to work on Wall Street. Didn't do so great in school at the end of my high school career, wound up in community college for 4 years instead of two, and had an itching to get to the workforce because all my friends were graduating four-year schools at the time. So I took the only job I could get on Wall Street, which was basically a ticket runner back in the day when you used to have the printed tickets in the pit. And I worked for Cantor Fitzgerald in New York in the Treasury Bond Department, and I went to college at night. So I learned really quickly that the trading floor was the best school there was. And when I went to class at night, the professors who had never worked on Wall Street had a totally different perspective of what reality was than what it really was. So I stopped going to college with about 30 credits shy of my degree. But short story, I started on the ticket desk, got promoted to being an assistant, actually a second assistant, then an assistant. 6 months in, I got promoted to assistant vice president and then a VP, mainly in treasuries and swaps. And then for the last 2 years, I started trading a new product, TED spreads, on screen with another guy. We launched that product for Cantor. I went to London for a short while, didn't really like it, came back, and was kind of at the end of my rope on Wall Street. I've been there 5 years. I felt no real sense of accomplishment, even though I was making money. And I loved film and independent film. So I took a couple film classes, realized I wasn't really a creative person, but I had a very big capacity for logistics, because as a trader, I tracked 40, 50 trades a day in my head as they were live. So when I went to a film set and I said, "Who keeps all this going?" They said, "The producer." I was like, "That's the guy I want to be." So I took an unpaid internship and I made photocopies and grabbed guys coffee at a film company in New York. Worked my way up to as an assistant, and then got some production experience, became a producer. Moved out to California after 3 years and raised money for my Wall Street crowd to start a film company, which went well for a while, but like most film companies, it always ends in tears.
Right.
But through that process, over about 4 years, I met a lot of people. One was a producer for Mark Burnett, and they were starting season 5 of The Apprentice. And they asked me, they said, "Hey, you got a creative producing background and you're a Wall Street guy. You could really relate to these CEOs, so you should come try it out." So I did, and I loved it. It was great. It was my first real touch of business after being away from it for about 7 years. So I produced 2 seasons of The Apprentice as a brand integration and challenge producer. I left there, moved into casual gaming. In 2006, it was starting to become a really big alternative marketing play. Also for Mark Burnett, I produced games for Shrek the Third and some other properties for DreamWorks. Left there, started my own company to do that, and for 3 years, 2006 through 8, loved it. I had my own company doing brand integrations for brands, for agencies, for networks, for studios. Everything was plentiful, as you remember, in 2005,
Sure,
6,
sure.
and 7. In 2008, it all came to a crashing halt. I went back to television, and Undercover Boss was starting as a show, and they were having some problems finding CEOs to trust to go on TV because America
Right.
hated all these
Oh yeah.
CEOs at the time. And because I have relationships, I was able to help convince guys to trust me and go on the show. Did season one, it became a hit. I did season two. I met with about 250 CEOs over that year and a half, and another 300 or 400 C-suite execs, and my network just blew up. And from being around not only CEOs but a lot of founder CEOs, real meat eaters. I mean, serious guys and gals. It rekindled that entrepreneurial spirit in me that had me quit Wall Street to start a film company and leave that to go do something else. And in 2010, all the incubators were starting to pop up and get a lot of press. So I went to some demo days and kind of got a lay of the land, and it reminded me a lot of Web 1.0 before everything blew up. It was like the Wild West, and so I left Undercover Boss after season two, and I did two startups between 2010 and the end of 2012. One was a consumer product startup with a mobile product. The other was an enterprise software product. And in both instances, I worked with people who had full-time jobs, who had the ideas, and I was able to execute them, get product built, get them distributed, both online and in retail, or have somebody adopt that program. But we always hit a wall when it came time for that person to quit their job, like I had,
Right.
and go build a company. So at the end of 2012, I was kind of faced with, I was newly married, wanted to start a family. I was 42 years old, and I went around to the local incubators and said, hey, pair me up with somebody. I'm an executor. I'm a business guy. I got relationships. I've built stuff. I've managed $1 million a day budget or $1 million a week, 5 to 300 people. And there really wasn't a place for me. Everybody wanted to focus on guys who could code, and they were engineers and designers. And everybody said, you're a great biz dev guy. You should go be a biz dev guy. And I just rejected that wholly, you know? So I did a deep dive interviewing people that went through the incubators, people that invested in them, people that were successful or not, and crafted a vision that they concentrated almost exclusively on execution. If you're a great executor, you would get some cash, or your team would, and they put you in a room for a few months, and you come up, with ideas. And every couple of weeks, you might pivot that idea, and if you found something that you could prototype or pitch for follow-on funding, you would. My experience was working with everyday folks who were not skilled people, but nonetheless had good ideas that were scalable. And I had kind of a knack, I thought, for picking the products that were not just products or features, but scalable businesses. And I had this massive distribution network of relationships that I had accumulated over the years. And I saw Shark Tank become a massive hit from Mark Burnett. Everybody's sitting at home saying, I have a better mousetrap. I saw Kickstarter fund $500 million worth of projects in a year with really aggressive consumers willing to throw down cash for some product they might never even get. And in 2012, a lot of the consumer internet stocks tanked. So VCs shifted their focus to enterprise.
Right.
And I said, well, if I want to be a first-time fund manager and I don't have to compete for deal flow, I'm going to go after the consumer folks, because everybody thinks they're just small businesses, but they can be big businesses. So I put the model for Wayfounder together. I had met my co-founder, who's now one of my advisors, Ryan Wilson, who has a lot of competition background in a mastermind group here in LA, and we decided to use that competition model as a funnel for ideas. And then separate those people at the very beginning from the executors. And in a model where traditionally an incubator would give somebody cash to go learn through mentorship and resources to build something, we said, we'll go the other way. We'll pay you upfront for your idea and give you long-term participation, but give that 50 grand to somebody who specifically builds apps or baby products or whatever that thing is, so we have a better chance of success.
Right.
And that brought me to this place today. We, I raised a small friends and family round, and then I started raising a real venture fund. We had our first closing in December, and then decided to launch our first competition last week nationally.
Very good. And Damon, it's just impressive to me the journey that you went through, going through finance and film and coming back to entrepreneurship. And what is more interesting to me is you're focusing on the ideas, and everybody's looking at, I want to see something, I want to see a product, I want to see. What do you think is is the key, or the interest in starting with the idea? Because you know the way is very, very long.
Yeah.
Tell me about the concept here.
So for me, I've always been big on visualization. Even today, every morning and every night before I go to bed, I used to write them down. Now I recorded them audio. I have my 1, 3, 5, 10-year goals, personal and professional, and I visualize them every day. And
Right.
when I was 13, I saw myself in a trading pit on Wall Street, and 10 years later, I'm there. Same thing with producing. You're usually tasked with, here's a big idea. Now, with scarce resources, with big expectations, go build something with a bunch of people that really aren't used to working together.
Right.
So when it came to entrepreneurship, I gravitated towards the idea flow, and I'm not really a great idea generator, but if you tell me this is what I see in my head, I'm really good at getting people, whether they're designers, engineers, coders, whatever it might be, to craft something and deliver that. So in a world where everyone was focusing on great executors because they have tremendous value, I said those executors do have value, but so do the idea people. Some people say an idea is worthless. I don't believe that. Other people say ideas are worth millions. I don't believe that either,
Right.
because I could have an idea for cold fusion, but it's worthless because I can't
Right.
go build a reactor, right? But if I have an idea for a new cell phone case or something, that's got some value because I can build that.
Of course.
So I saw a lot of focus on execution and not ideas, and a lot of people hungry to get their ideas realized, whether through Kickstarter or whatever it might be, or Quirky. Um, and it just seemed like there should be a proper reward in a business sense for those people.
And a lot of our audience are professionals, attorneys, financial people, and people that are, they could be self-employed, but they have ideas how to improve my practice, how to make our clients better. The problem is that when you have an idea, between idea and execution, there's a big, big gap. And I wanted to know, how do you bridge that gap? Somebody has an idea, what would be some good tips or some steps to push them towards execution?
Sure. So outside the Wayfounder platform, if I have friends all the time that call me or email me and say, "Oh, I have an idea. What do I do?"
Right.
So the first thing I do is say, "Are you committed to seeing this through? Do you wake up every morning saying the world needs a GPS dog collar or whatever it is?"
Right.
Because that passion is going to carry you through the peaks and valleys of getting that there. If you still say yes, then what is your financial commitment to getting it there? I always hear from people, "Oh, I don't have the money to do a startup or build
Right.
something." 99, there's always the 1% that's true for, but 99% of people make a conscious choice every day not to follow their dreams. Every time you go eat out in a restaurant, you go away for a weekend, you decide to trade in your car, you decide to redo your kitchen, whatever it might be, that's a conscious decision, because eating in one night a week for a year might save you a couple grand. Guess what? You can 3D print a product idea for a couple grand. So there's
Right.
always a way to get things done. So I would suggest making sure that they're committed. If they are, there's a tremendous amount of resources out there for the lean startup method, which I don't adhere to word for word, but I use as a framework. And basically, the tenet is prove to yourself and to others that customers really want what you have in a really bare bones format with maybe one feature. So whether it's getting a prototype made,
Right.
excuse me, or even going to a coffee shop with a piece of paper with something that looks like an iPad screen with sticky notes, which real developers I know do this, and ask people, would you use this thing? Is this intuitive? Get some customer feedback. If you have the customer feedback, then either work with somebody who is a real entrepreneur, or there's a lot of services out there that can help you, budget, figure out what you need. But the basic process is, as cheaply as you can, create some viable product that you can show people and validate the idea. And then if you validate it, then you really have to figure out a roadmap. Is this something that you raise money from your friends and family for? Is this something that you go and crowdfund? Is this something that you decide to build? Whatever that
Right.
might be.
And Damon, what are some of the reasons that you see people fail taking their ideas into execution based on your experience?
Sure, there's a couple things. One, people think it needs to be perfect. I see that a lot. I've dealt with that with former partners of my own where, this might be ready, this cup of coffee might be ready to go to market as is to test the coffee, but they need a platinum cup with, five things that jingle on it or whatever it might
Right.
be. And you wind up adding so many features that you never get to market, and you lose the whole focus. Another reason is that people think that you need to go from idea to I need my project on a shelf in Walmart, right?
Right.
And you read articles about this, and I mention this in my blog posts. Really smart, educated people, professionals, might go to a factory in China because they think that's what they need to do, and order $100,000 worth of product without even testing one, and you wind up with a garage full of handbags or whatever they
Right.
might be. So start small. There's no shame in starting small because most people don't realize that the idea in their head is going to change so many times before it gets to the consumer
Right.
that they get so locked on that one vision. And you can stay passionate about solving a problem or providing a service, but you can't stay married to that one first vision because you need
Right.
to be flexible. So being flexible and also lack of commitment, oh, I talked to these two experts and they said it's a bad idea. Well, who
Right.
cares? I mean, I can
Right.
tell you, who cares? I can tell you when my mobile product, I wanted to get it patented, and I said, "Who's the best IP attorney in Los Angeles?" And everybody said, "Oh, these guys, very expensive."
Right.
So I went there, asked for a patent opinion letter. They charged me a lot of money, and they
Right.
said, "This thing's not patentable." And I said, "Well, thank you, but that's the wrong answer because I'm looking for somebody to tell me yes." I interviewed maybe 20 patent attorneys, and I found
Right.
one down in Irvine who said, "I can do that for you." He filed 3 patents, and I have 2 of them, and I have them hanging on my wall for the
Right.
guys that work for me to prove that, like, if 100 people tell you something's wrong, then maybe start thinking about it. But you can't constantly pivot your plan or your strategy or what you're doing based on every meeting because
Right.
nobody knows.
Right. Exactly. And unless you try it and you really convinced that it's not working, there's no door that is closed there.
And I even have, I mean, even guys like Dropbox
Right.
that pitched real VCs gave them crazy feedback, and I had it in my deck as an example of a lean software play. But you would be shocked at the reasons. Oh, Google could build that, or who needs another storage site, or
Right.
But if you really think you can provide value for somebody and that they'll pay for that, then you need to ignore even the experts
And do
and
it.
do it.
Right.
And also some people. Last thing I'll say is they let negative feedback really seep too deep into their subconscious. And it's one thing, I think I spoke about this when I saw you in San Diego to the crowd,
Right.
you'll get negative feedback from people that are just haters because they're jealous you're an entrepreneur.
Right.
You'll get negative feedback from people who just don't think that it's possible, and you have to ignore that. And the hardest negative feedback to ignore is from your friends and family because their negative feedback doesn't come out of real negativity. It comes from these stories they hear about entrepreneurs and the real horrible things they endure. And their negativity comes out of love because they don't want to see you suffer.
Right.
But you still need to say, if you're the kind of person that wakes up every day wanting to change the world because of XYZ, you got to ignore the people that you love as much as the people who are respected at the top of their game.
Right. No, that's great tips of advice. And talking about the people who are trying to start businesses, I have a feeling that a lot of people are trying to do things just because things are hot. So right now, mobile is hot, or apps are hot, and they don't do it because they want to do it. They just want to do it because they want to make money because everybody's doing apps. Remember during the app explosion, everybody would go,
Yep.
and their grandmother were doing apps.
Yep.
And do you see that happening today right now?
Oh, tons. I can't tell you how many demo days or pitch days I go to in LA or other places, and it's the fifth copycat of something that just raised $30 million, whatever it might be.
Right.
And one of my mentors here in LA describes it as some companies aren't raising money to build something; they're raising money to raise more money because they're chasing a valuation so that early guys can cash out. And
Right.
I get it. I am not a hater. Like I'm a Wall Street guy at heart. The whole big system of institutional funds that flow, going to happen. It's going to be 99% that fail. It's very inefficient, but whatever have you. But there are but as an individual, you need to wake up every day because you need your passion to convince investors, to convince people that come work for you, either for free or a little for cash.
Right. And
if you have a family, it's not your dream, but you're going to have to convince them that, that there's a rainbow at the end of, or there's a pot of gold at the end of this rainbow, or maybe there's even
Right.
not even a rainbow here, that the
Right.
clouds will part.
Right.
And without being passionate, it's like when I left brand integration, I had great relationships with the Fortune 100 companies, but I had a real hard time honestly telling somebody, if you give me $100,000, the best thing for your brand is to have, this featured in a reality show segment. Like it had
Right.
no soul anymore. So, but now I've been dealing with Wayfounder for a year and a half,
Mm-hmm.
and my head pops off sometimes when I'm talking. I get
Right.
so excited about what we're doing from an empowerment and engagement standpoint, not even just from a financial standpoint.
Sure.
And that's what carries me through. That's why I have guys working for me for free, or investors that would never have never invested in funds before that said, this is the first one I'm going to do.
Right. Because they see the passion and they see the the potential of this thing exploding. Right.
Yeah, you have to also have the potential. You can't just
Right.
have crazy passion, but there's only so far numbers on a graph or Excel spreadsheet will get you.
It's just very interesting the whole concept that you mentioned. But I'm curious to know what are some of the hotter industries right now that you think people should get into if they do have the passion, where the need is actually.
Yeah, I mean, I made a conscious decision when I started this in early 2013 to stay away from enterprise,
Hmm.
because it costs a lot more money to develop and prototype and do customer development, and longer lead times, and everybody was focused on it. So for me, it's just been consumer, and where it used to be, oh, now baby's hot or pet's hot, the whole world is open. If you have a passion, I collect stationery, right? I have like
Right.
really nice fountain pens or notebooks.
Right.
And there are guys raising Kickstarter campaigns of $50,000 for a single piece of copper machined pen.
Yeah.
And now he's got a real business. Like it's crazy. So if you pay $100 for it, like it's
Right.
nuts. So on the consumer side, everything that used to be niche and very hard to access, now niche is highly accessible. And people that want to fill that need for their niche are willing to throw down cash for it. So I don't have a specific sector. I mean, there's some things like 2008 to 10, the only consumer category that didn't go down was pet products.
Right.
Everything else went down in the recession, but regardless of people's situations, even irrationally, they spent money on their pets every month from 2008 to 10.
Right.
But that being said, highly competitive, very expensive to advertise and get a notice in the market, and the big players have, almost a monopoly on shelf space. But I've also seen innovative pet products come up on Kickstarter because everything's social now. So,
Right.
if you have a good story, it can go viral. What people
Right.
think is I'm going to build an app and it's going to go viral. There's no magic viral fairy, right? It's an average cost of 150 grand, I think the last report was, to really market an app, to be
Right.
noticed in the sea of the other thousand that come out every week, or whatever it is. So I wouldn't say there's a specific hot category, but if you have a passion, you can find advocates for that passion that are willing to support it.
Right. So there's not the one area right now. It's pretty much open game. It's just
I mean, you have people talking about like in the consumer, like the virtual reality space with
right.
Oculus. So I'm
Right.
not going to go build a virtual reality thing, and it's
Right.
not my.
Right.
And if somebody had an idea for that in Wayfounder,
Yeah.
I would say that's wonderful, but I probably can't prototype that for the
Yeah.
$50 to $100,000 to go into it. If you have like, we're not going to make a medical device or anything else like that, but if you're talking about a physical product or consumer facing app that can be, prototyped and built and
Right.
tested for that, great. Like, please call us. Yeah.
Damon, I wanted to ask you about the personality and the passion of the founders that you see, even aside from the idea. This is I think is very important because people that are listening to the show, if they want to start a business or they are themselves they are the business. Where do you see the value of the person who's pitching the idea?
Their resilience is incredible. You need to be able to tell a story of something that you faced that was a mountain in your life, and if you didn't
Right.
climb it, you found a way to go through it or get around it. And there's a few things I should probably take a note. Like one was my favorite quote that I mentioned to you.
Right.
Like you need to be a warrior among men. And I could say that quote if you want. It was I brought it up that
Yeah.
out of every 100 men, 10 shouldn't be on a battlefield, 80 are nothing but targets, 9 are real fighters, and they'll really make the battle. but one guy, he's a
Right.
warrior. He'll bring everybody else home. And you
Right.
need to be the warrior because, and it's so rare. And I've always had a problem with co-founders in my life because I'm an all-in guy.
Right.
I'm going to quit school and go work on Wall Street. I'm going to quit Wall Street and literally pick up after the owner's dogs to learn the film business.
Right.
Like, I'm going to start Wayfounder. I'm going to learn everything about venture and call everybody in my contact book. I raise money from people I haven't seen since high school 25 years ago and
Right.
from CEOs I met on Undercover Boss that I interviewed for 3 hours. So, you need to be a warrior. The other thing is successful people in a founder mindset live in a green state of mind. I like to say that one of my pet peeves is people that live in the yellow. Like
Right.
if you're in a red state of mind, stoplight, you're not doing anything.
Right.
People in the yellow, they might go to an event, they might write a business plan or a deck, they might email two or three people, and then a few months go by and they go like, oh yeah, I should pick that up. Drives me crazy. Like if you're gonna commit, it's such a serious thing to start a business. I have so much respect for business and labor in general.
Right.
That it's sacred, you know. So if you're going to commit labor and ask other people to commit their time, labor, and resources, you better be fully committed. So commitment is the biggest character trait that I could think of. And what does that mean? That might mean I had a time during my mobile business that we ran out of money and I wasn't able to get any more from my co-founder or investors at the time. And I went and I took an 8-week producing gig, and I hadn't produced in a long time. And that money, I didn't buy new clothes. I didn't go on vacation with my family. I bought more product. Like that's literally what I
Right.
did with it. I was in a green light mode. So you need to be in a green light mode all the time, and you need to think like a warrior. You know, I mean,
Right.
every day it isn't just a battle. Every day is a battle, but every day is it's a war. Whether you're looking for
Excellent.
capital, whether we're trying to sell people your idea, whether it's resources, building. People think that you just click on a button and get a website, but as we were talking about before, somebody needs to write and make work
Right.
every word and everything that you click.
Right.
And guess what? It's going to be you because
Yeah.
because you're short on resources, right?
Right.
So yeah, I wrote every word of copy on my website except for the terms of use policy. Like,
Right. No, that's perfect. Think like a warrior. That's going to be a tweetable quote from that show, from this show.
but if you want, I'll tweet the quote out so you have it.
Absolutely. Damon, I wanted to take you back to your producing time, to your producing day. And I think it's important and interesting to me and also probably to the listeners because it's a whole different world to me. It's a different world because it's fast. You learn to be efficient, I believe. You have to know how to manage budgets and people. And also the people that you're working with are special people. And especially, I can imagine the Mark Burnett world is a whole different world. This is one of the, if not the most successful producer ever. Every show is different. Every show is successful. And I want you to tell me, first of all, what was your job about? I mean, I know that you were talking about brand integration, but tell me a bit more about that. Why is it
Sure.
important?
So as a challenge or task producer on the show, there were about 3 months of prep, and then you would shoot. The show would take about 70 days to shoot.
Right.
70 days in New York. Out of that, you were shooting for I can't remember how many, but at the start of every season in pre-production, you would have three categories of tasks. One, you have brands that say, I want to be on The Apprentice. And we get word of that, and it's like, oh, go think of something creative, how Target or Starbucks or Arrowhead Water, how can you be on the show? Second are brands that Mark or the network wanted to work with, and they said, oh, I want to go work with Dick's Sporting Goods, think of something creative. Excuse me. And the third were just regardless of the brand, creative things that hadn't been done before. Because once you get to season 4 or 5 of a show, a lot of things have been done before.
Right.
So for months, we would spend, talking to brands, talking to their agencies, and I really learned about marketing at a high level, about communicating a message. Like, what is a brand message? Because it isn't a flyer or a commercial.
Right.
It's very, very specific, right? And for brand integration, rather than product placement, they pay a lot more money for it, so they expect a lot more. And you need to convey that message in a creative way that is also resounding with a viewer.
Right.
So you work with brands, you come up with campaigns, you come up with episode ideas. Ultimately, you sell them. You get on the phone and you call CEOs and CFOs of companies that have never. I remember I tried calling a big financial services firm CFO.
Right.
Couldn't take me. Right? This was my first week on the job. And we go to the weekly meeting, and the head producer was like, "Did you hear back yet?" And I was like, "No." They were like, "Okay, how are you calling?" And I was like, "Oh, this is Damon D'Amore calling for, Jacob." No, no, no. You say, this is Damon D'Amore calling from The Apprentice with Donald Trump, and call right back. What can I do for you? I need
Right.
$3 million. I can give you 2.5. Like, it was literally a conversation like that.
Wow.
And then you get ready and you go to New York City when it was still shot in New York before they came to LA, and now they're back there again. But you work with the brands and their agencies, the people on the ground, to pre-produce that episode, and then each episode would take 3 days to shoot.
Right.
Trump says, "This is what we're doing," and then the contestants go off and do it through the night. Next morning, they present. The CEOs or the representatives of the brand pick a winner, and then one team, they both go home. The next day is judgment for the people that lost, and the
Right.
people that won get their reward. So a lot of it was communicating brand messaging, learning how agencies spoke,
Hmm.
learning how. And the biggest thing I learned was the management of expectations, both between the network,
Right.
the brands, the CEOs, Mark, and the producers, whatever it might be. And even today, as an entrepreneur, you're managing expectations between people you're taking money from, the end product that you're going to show them, the
Right.
people that are going to buy it, et cetera. So, at a high level, managing expectations based on one single message that you had to craft. And that was the most valuable experience that I learned there. And also the relationships, which, frankly, when I got there, other people, a lot of other producers on the show weren't business people. They were just
Right.
producers, and they were really, really good at their jobs. They were the best because they were on the show. But I remember getting there the first time we shot something, and the CEO is by himself, like by the craft service table, eating a granola bar. And I was like, "Why is nobody talking to that guy?"
Right.
And they were like, "What are we going to talk to him about?" I said, "People would pay like 10 grand to have 5 minutes with that guy. He's the CEO of a Fortune 100 company."
Right.
And they were like, "What?" I was like, "Well, I don't plan on doing this till I'm 50 or 60, right?" Like, I already knew, even though I loved it,
Sure.
it was a play. So my networking skills from Wall Street, which was absolutely the most valuable thing I learned, translated into The Apprentice. And then when I realized I was starting to build this relationship database, and they weren't just people on a sheet. I mean,
Sure.
you hang out with these people, meet their families,
Right.
and yeah, it was managing the expectations of parties that are involved at a high level with high stakes. And even if you're trying to sell a 99-cent app,
Right.
there are high stakes because you have most likely quit your job, your family is all in behind you, you have investors that maybe and if you know them, chances are they really couldn't afford to give you 5 or 10 grand, right? If
Right.
you don't know them, your reputation to investors down the line, "Oh, I gave this guy 50 grand and he blew it because blah, 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 blah." So, yeah, long answer, I'm sorry.
That's good. And what is the profile of the CEOs that are looking to come on the show? Did they have a particular kind of or there was not really
It was different for Apprentice than Undercover Boss because
yeah.
Apprentice they were mainly just presenting and then being a,
Right.
a judge. They had to have interesting companies and products. You couldn't just say, "Oh,
Right.
here's a block of ice. Give me $5 million and I'll put you on a show."
Right.
For Undercover Boss, it was more about people who were able to show the capacity for empathy with their workers.
Right.
So, because in 2008, everybody was viewed as a guy on a private jet in a black tower, totally disconnected from people who are losing their
Sure.
homes, whatever it might be. So if you take a guy who's literally, some of these guys are in black towers, not in a negative way, but
Right.
they're in a rarefied atmosphere. If you're going to put a guy that has 50,000 employees flipping burgers all of a sudden, can they really relate to somebody even in disguise?
Right.
So the way that we did that was when I would interview them, we would go through 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours of one-on-one interviews, usually alone. Sometimes the
Yeah.
PR people weren't even in the room. And you start off with business, then you get personal, and you get to the struggles and the resilience factor that I talked about, and you see who's really got chops. And then those guys and gals got on the show.
Right. And to me, it's a very educating show. I mean, the Undercover Boss is just so you just get to see what are they thinking and how they are evaluating these people working for them, and it's different in every episode. I mean, I watched a few of these episodes, and you always learn something.
It's extremely valuable to them
Yeah.
also because one of them even said, they're like, I'm up here like doing my job and I see a line
Right.
item and I might say, oh, we could shave that by 10%. But then all of a sudden, they're in a storefront in Wichita or somewhere,
Right.
and they see what it means to go from 5 people to two on a shift, and you're actually losing money because you can't. People are walking out the door.
Right.
So, it's incredibly. Aside from the personal learnings, there's a lot of business learnings that they get that they normally wouldn't. And since then, you read stories about companies who weren't even on the show, who not even undercover, their CEO once a month goes to some thing for a day and works wherever on the line because it's incredibly valuable
Yeah.
and it's really good. It's good engagement for your employees. We had one brand who had a CEO had just taken over for the brand, and the previous CEO had destroyed its relationships with his franchisees. And
Yeah.
this CEO said, "This is a good way before my annual franchisee meeting when I'm going to go get my head taken off to show people that I know what you go through as a guy who owns one of my stores
Right.
3,000 miles from where I live and work." And it did. He walked into that franchisee meeting, and it was hands to hand,
Yeah.
clapping hands and hugs, and it helps. And it's not just from it's not a phony emotional thing. It's there's real business learnings that you take from that.
Right. And I'm always interested about Donald Trump and what he was doing on the show. I mean, tell me one thing that you took away from working those few years with him. Something,
You have limited time with him, but
of
especially in New
course.
York. I mean,
Right.
he's doing lots of stuff. When he was in LA, it's like, oh, what's going on?
Right.
But in New York, his time is the most valuable thing to him. And I remember one time we were doing something, and they were like, oh, the camera ran out of film back when you used tapes or whatever,
Right.
and I was like, excuse me, Donald, we need to reshoot this. And he looked at me, he smiled, he said, if you really need it, I'm more than happy to do it. If you're wasting my time, I'm going to be extremely angry. And it was like his
Right.
most valuable thing to him is his time because he can only call so many people per day and he can only do so
Right.
much. And it really stuck with me. So if I'm with somebody and
This
they're
is
wasting
great.
time,
Yeah.
not that I'm, in my mind, I'm as valuable as Trump because I'm building my own thing, but yeah, I had somebody yesterday who scheduled a meeting 2 weeks in advance, and 35 minutes later, I said, "Are you okay? Are you late?" And they were like, "Oh, something came up. I need to reschedule." I was like, "You're
Right.
not going to tell me that? Like, I'm building a business."
Right.
So yeah, the one thing from Donald was that time is the most important, and that he is, along with Mark, probably the greatest salesman on the planet.
Right.
Mark's chief strength, in my opinion, isn't the producing; it's his salesmanship.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, Donald could say, this is the greatest water to ever be put in a bottle on the planet. And he could
Right.
say it with such conviction that people believe him.
Right.
And I remember, maybe it was ice cream. He was opening up something in the Trump Tower, and he put a sign out front in Trump Tower that said, best ice cream in the world, like here. And his lawyers were like, you got to take that down. You can't
Right.
even make that claim. And he was
Right.
like, why not? It is the best ice cream in the world. But yeah, he could sell ice to a penguin. And same thing with Mark. And I've seen Mark with whether it's CEOs or studio executives, like
Yeah.
it's highly impressive.
Yeah.
He's
Mark
one
has he has this immigrant drive, and he continues to carry with him. Even today, he's just
Yeah,
this.
and I don't want to, speak like I'm super close with him, but you know, people always ask me about Undercover Boss specifically, and I think
Right.
I think it's true with guys like Mark that are that driven even after they make a gazillion dollars.
Right.
Everybody said, "Oh, you should write a book. What's the one thing you learned from Undercover Boss? Is it passion? Is it
Right.
this, that?" And I'm going to write a blog post about it because the number one motivator for the most successful people I met was
Right.
fear.
Right.
Absolute fear. Fear of going back to the farm. Fear of being proven wrong by all the naysayers.
Right.
Fear of being really, really, really poor again. And time again, the most successful people I met, that's what drove them. And
Right.
I'm writing a blog post called "What Are You Running From?" Because it better be something if you plan on being super successful. Like, are there anomalies?
Right.
Sure, you could create some great algorithm and go make a gazillion dollars or write a book or a movie, but you can't live your life based on what an anomaly might prove. Um, and yeah, I've got my own demons. It's like you're running from them
Of
all the
course.
time. But the most successful people, that was it. And I met one guy who he took over a family business, it went from $10 million about 15 years before, and they had their first $1 billion year 15 years later. And
Wow.
I walked in his office, and the walls are bare, nothing on the walls. And on the floor, around the whole office,
Right.
there's diplomas and photographs and paintings. And I was like, "Oh, did you just move in here? This is a really nice space." He's like, "I've been here 15 years." And I said, "Why is nothing on the walls?" And he said, "I'm afraid that if I hang stuff on the walls, I'll get comfortable and
Wow.
I'll blink one day and the board's going to remove me." And I was like, you have 100x from where you were 15 years ago and you're worldwide. And he was like, "Every day I'm afraid that like I'm going to lose my job." And it can't paralyze you, but it
Right.
can be a motivator. And I always tell people, you lock it up in a box in the back of your head and it's always there. And sometimes you need to tap into it yourself,
Right.
because sometimes when things get really dark, or there seems like there's no way out, you need
Go back to
you
the place.
need to go back to that place. And it's not
Yeah.
a fun place, but it's you got to be a warrior. Like, war isn't a fun thing. If you want
Right.
to kick back, take a desk job.
Right.
Have somebody contribute into your 401k. Get a pension. It's like, I'm
Right.
pension what for
Right.
entrepreneurs?
No, this is great. This is absolutely important because, have that bare wall, even if it's imaginary. Keep in mind that, you can lose it in a second if
Yeah,
you don't keep your guard.
yeah.
Excellent advice. And Damon, as we come close to the end of our show, I wanted to ask you, you already mentioned a quote, beautiful quote. What is another a book that inspired you that you want to share with our audience?
I mean, Out of the Shrug is my favorite book I've ever read. I read it twice. I read it the summer before I went to work on Wall Street. I was a beach badge checker in New Jersey.
Right.
I said, "I want the calmest job because I'm going to go on Wall Street." And my buddy said, "You're going to go on Wall Street, you need to read this book." And I sat in a beach chair and I read Out of the Shrug, and it changed my life, and it's changed so many people's lives that I've talked to. But I have extra copies in my office, and whenever somebody agrees to read it, I give them one.
Perfect.
But the sense of work ethic
Hmm.
and ego not being a negative thing. Like, I always tell people. I told my assistant the other day, when he saw me in a meeting with somebody who had a lot of money, was trying to throw around their weight as to terms they should have. I said, "Here I'm very polite, I'm smiling. In my head, like, it's not a rock on my shoulder, there's a mountain on my shoulder, because you need that confidence. And
Hmm.
I know that I might not be in a certain place that I want to be right now, but I can look back throughout my life and say, you know, you can't go work on Wall Street. You're a college kid. Oh, now you're super successful. You're not a creative person. You can't go be a movie producer. What do you know about reality or games?
Right.
What do you know about raising? Last year, people I really respect said, you can't raise a venture fund. You're in your 40s. You never went to Harvard. Or you don't know the networks and this and that. And then 5 months after I started in July when I had my first closing and registered with the SEC. I sent him the email.
Right.
It was like, in 2 years, you're going to see something else that I just couldn't do.
Exactly.
So yeah, Atlas Shrugged is it's been really influential, and just in the sense of work ethic that outside of love, there's nothing more sacred you can give than your labor, because,
Right.
like Donald, it's what you do with your time. I
Right.
can spend my time playing video games, helping people in charity, doing whatever it might be, but there's only so much time. You
Right.
wake up in the morning, eventually you got to go to bed, and what do you do in that
That's all.
time frame?
What counts.
That's what matters.
Right.
And you better, and real entrepreneurs, no matter how tough stuff gets, when you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror,
Right.
you're honest with yourself and you know who you are. And even if you're not where you want to be, or if you slacked the day before and you only made 10 calls instead of 50, like, real entrepreneurs are honest with themselves. And most people, when you asked before what causes them to fail, they don't want to be honest with themselves. I
Right.
talk to people all the time that, what do you want to do? I want to be an entrepreneur. What does that mean? Like, go build something.
Right.
Go make a cardboard prototype. Like, Procter and Gamble uses cardboard prototypes in focus groups.
Right.
Like, there's no excuse. So yeah.
If there's one, coming back to that, if there's one tip you're going to give to somebody who's starting out right now, want to start a company, what would it be? One thing.
One thing,
Yeah.
it would be find a mentor.
Excellent.
Find somebody who's not just has the resume, but cares so much about mentoring someone specifically and what that really entails. A few years ago, I tried to get a mentor, and I would meet people and I would say, "You're wonderful. Could you be my mentor?" And it's terrifying because in their mind they're like, oh my God, there's this time commitment, or I might have to write checks or whatever it
Sure.
is. So a really good friend of mine is very, very successful. Said to me, don't ask. Like, ask for some advice, and then a few weeks or months later, when you follow it, reach back and say, I've done this, and now I have another question. And sure enough, my mentor now, who's my first investor and he's on my advisory board, he believed in me because somebody believed in him when it wasn't logical to believe in him.
Sure.
And I went to him for a job is how he met me. And he said, "So what do you do?" And I showed him my product that I sold like 70,000 units of and other stuff. And he said, "I can't hire you. Like he literally said, you're just like me, but you don't drive an Aston Martin yet."
Right.
And I said, "What?" And he said, "Look," he said, "I blew up 4 or 5 businesses, wrong partners, wrong idea." He was like, "Somebody stuck with me until I found the right one." He was like, "I'm going to help you. You just got to promise to pay it forward." And when it came down to it, he's laid it down every time, whether it's relationships or cash or whatever it might be, or validating me with other guys and gals.
Right.
And it's really important to find that person because it's not just about professional. They know what it's like personally to go through the journey of being a founder,
Right.
and it's all interwoven, because how your personal life affects you during the day when you're on the phone or pitching is it's massive, and you need to be able to call somebody and say, "Hey, I've hit a wall with my relationship or finances or whatever it might be, or my perception of myself, or people aren't getting me." And you need to find somebody, and you can start through trade organizations. You can start from people who were successful and had exits, and now we're just like kicking
Perfect.
around looking for something to do. I always tell people in LA, go to the universities, go find the people who teach these classes, especially in night school because they're professionals.
Right.
I had somebody with a beauty product idea. I said, go find the cosmetics like chemists and marketing people, and if you cold call 20 people, one of them will let you buy them lunch, and you
Right.
just same thing.
Right.
Just do it. There is no excuse.
Find a mentor. That's perfect advice. And then,
Yeah.
Damon, if somebody wants to find where you are online, can you give us some link
Sure.
to your website?
It's just Wayfounder, WAYFOUNDER.com, and my email is Damon@wayfounder.com. I
Excellent.
never understood people who you go to the website and their email is like some cryptic hidden
Right.
thing. Like, email me,
Yeah, nobody
totally.
does it anymore, right? Nobody puts their email out there anymore because of all
Yeah,
these. That's
and
perfect.
I speak almost every month at like at-risk schools and high schools in around LA. And I always tell kids, email me, like I'm here to,
Right.
and out of like 60 kids in the last few months that I've met, 2 of them did. And
Right.
I gave them a business model generation book to teach them a method, and I'm helping them with their business plans. But if somebody offers you help,
Email. You better email. Yeah,
email
yeah.
them. Like
Well,
you told me like 4 times when I met you, I'm going to email you. I'm going to email you. I'm going to email you. And
right.
I was like, that guy's going to email me.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Damon. It was a true pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having
We'll have all the links in the transcript of the show and on the blog post. And once again, this is Jacob Sapochnik, enchantinglawyer.com. We'd love to hear from you. Put your comments. Email us. Email me, Jacob@enchantinglawyer.com. And we'd love to have you on our next show. Thank you, guys.